In the past, American pickers relied heavily on Frank Fritz, a man who restored forgotten villages to their former glory and transformed rust into gold. But he abruptly disappeared in 2020. No announcement, no conclusion, no farewell. Questions kept coming up as the show went on. Was he ill? Went on. Was he ill? Was he let go? Why was there no sound? The reality was hidden for years behind sealed contracts, conservatorship documents, and court filings. The story is eventually coming to light in 2025. The mystery surrounding Frank Fritz has finally been answered, and it's not what we expected. An abrupt absence. Frank Fritz was more than just a well-known TV personality. He was the American picker's lifeblood. Viewers followed him for more than 10 years as he explored the dusty, forgotten streets of America, discovering artifacts from a bygone era stashed in basements, attics, and barns. He had more than a keen sense of antiques as a gift. It was his sincere interest in the backstories of each piece. Frank found more than simply antiques. He unearthed history, memories, and occasionally the core of the American character. He was more than just a collector because of his warmth and candor. For fans who felt like they were on every expedition with him, he was a buddy, a historian, and a storyteller. The relationship between Frank and his long-standing colleague, Mike Wolfe, was just as important to American pickers' charm as the finds. They were the epitome of brothers. Their friendship, competitiveness, and respect for one another served as the series' emotional anchor. Viewers were not merely seeing the buying and selling of antiquities. They were observing a very human bond that would serve as the show's emotional fulcrum for many years. Then Frank was gone as abruptly as a barn door slamming. He left the show without any fanfare or explanation in 2020. He was absent from certain episodes, yet the absence was noticeable. There was an odd silence where his presence once was. No goodbye episode, no public remark. Although he was silently thanked in the credits, the show never directly addressed his disappearance. As rumors circulated, fans were kept in the dark and frantically searching for answers. Did you have a personal crisis? A disagreement with Mike? Maybe a fight against addiction or treatment? Or perhaps behind-the-scenes disputes? Rumors went viral on social media, but Frank himself said nothing. The production business did not provide much information. A man who dedicated his life to revealing lost histories found himself reduced to a mystery, forgotten by the public, and removed from the story he helped write. The health issues that are concealed from view. Frank was waging a far harder struggle in the background, away from the cameras and his charming grins. He spent years treating Crohn's disease, a debilitating autoimmune condition that severely damages the digestive tract. Even the strongest can be devastated by this unrelenting illness, which is characterized by excruciating stomach pain, persistent exhaustion, and erratic flare-ups. Fans only saw the vivacious, daring Frank on film, but the real Frank was far more difficult. Wahoo! Few people recognize the silent weight of his condition. Crohn's disease doesn't produce noticeable scars like other diseases or injuries do. It is concealed beneath the surface and is frequently misinterpreted and disregarded by others. Frank, however, had to balance taking his meds, dealing with his discomfort, and enduring the psychological and physical toll that the illness took on him every day. In 2019, the situation deteriorated. A significant back operation was performed on Frank in an attempt to restore his health. Rather, it's signaling the start of a downhill trend. Fans thought the lengthy filming pause caused by the surgery was a minor obstacle. However, a series of health problems resulted from the operation's difficulties, which were exacerbated by the underlying Crohn's disease and other chronic diseases. He started to lose strength. He started to lose weight, and the enthusiasm that drove his travels waned. The man who had earlier traveled great distances to find antiques now had trouble with everyday tasks. Behind closed doors, the lively personality waned and was replaced by fatigue and suffering. Although those closest to him were aware of how fragile his health was, the public saw it as a silent disappearance. Fans were devastated and perplexed as he faded out of the spotlight and fought fights that no camera ever captured, since the truth behind his deterioration was a fiercely kept secret. He was silenced by the stroke. Then the morning of July 14, 2022 arrived, a day that would change Frank's story forever. Frank had a severe stroke in the peaceful surroundings of his Iowa home, which was filled with recollections and echoes of his travels. It was devastating, abrupt, and ruthless. Frank was taken to the hospital in an emergency after a close friend discovered him unconscious. Medical personnel moved quickly to save his life, but it was just the start of a new battle. He had severe brain damage from the stroke, which left him largely paralyzed and unable to speak clearly. The flaming soul that had enchanted millions was now imprisoned in quiet behind a frail body. His voice, which was once full of laughter and anecdotes, started to sound painful. The man who used to drive down twisting back roads looking for treasures was now confined to a wheelchair and needed help with even the most basic chores. Efforts to converse with him were received with silence and frustration. His once vibrant presence has diminished to a shadow. Whoa. The court swiftly created a conservatorship to oversee his personal affairs and medical treatment after realizing how serious his situation was. After Frank was moved to a specialized care facility, stroke rehabilitation specialist took control. However, the unpleasant reality persisted even with the best care available. He lost his freedom, which was the essence of who he was. Fans were kept in the dark about the tragic developments of his medical condition, while intimate friends and family mourned the active guy they had known. The producing company only provided sparse, ambiguous updates. His significant influence on the program and its viewers was not acknowledged, nor were there any accolades. His name, which once stood for camaraderie, curiosity, and adventure, gradually disappeared from popular discourse. The hush in the sector was deafening. A peaceful obscurity had befallen a man who had uncovered innumerable stories and histories, a sobering reminder of the transient nature of celebrity in the face of human frailty. A little peace, a little peace. Due to Frank Fritz's abrupt departure from public life, 2023 was a year filled with rumors and uncertainty. The hush that pleaded for explanations but received none was deafening to American Pickers fans. They began to conjecture about potential altercations with his co-star Mike Wolfe or the show's actual production. Had Frank lost his job? Would he ever return, even for a final episode? Why was there no internet information on his exit from the show? This was a riddle that was right in front of you. However, a silent, almost covert chapter was being written behind the scenes amidst the circulating rumors and unresolved issues. Frank and Mike Wolfe, whose relationship had once been the show's lifeblood, reunited in a very private setting. There was no television script for this reunion. It happened away from the harsh spotlight of the studio and the incessant scrutiny of social media. The two men, who were longtime friends struggling with time, suffering, and distance, met in a small, secret place. The interaction would later be described as deeply emotional by others who knew them. It wasn't only words that Frank and Mike exchanged. A tentative healing of a tie broken by years of quiet and personal adversity, they had a tenuous reconciliation. Unspoken emotions filled the air between them. As memories of innumerable road trips, dusty barns, and antique treasures flooded back, tears were shed uncontrollably. However, there was also an indisputable weight, a consciousness of the years gone, the opportunities squandered, and the personal struggles everyone had faced separately. Their dialogue was a nuanced dance of introspection, sorrow, reconciliation, and hesitancy. In ways neither man had before publicly acknowledged, vulnerability emerged, exposing a side of Frank and Mike that fans had just briefly seen. Despite its poignancy, this reunion did not serve as a resolution. It did not reverse the irreversible deterioration of Frank's health or remove the scars caused by time. It was a brief haven, a precarious reprieve before the weight of reality set in again. The icy shadow of growing financial, medical, and legal difficulties was hidden beneath the warmth of friendship. The rest of Frank's life was discreetly shaped by intricate forces out of the public eye. Despite the world's wild speculation, this meeting signaling the silent recognition of a much worse chapter that was about to begin. Frank Fritz would never appear on the big screen again. Rather, he would be permanently departing from the medical truth that underlies this. When Frank Fritz suffered a stroke in the middle of 2022, the public was initially sympathetic and concerned, but they were unaware of the full scope of his health issues. A complex network of chronic ailments and growing medical issues lay beneath the surface of that one tragic incident, creating a much more dire picture than anyone could have imagined. Frank was dealing with significant aortic stenosis, in addition to the stroke's immediate paralysis and communication difficulties. His heart had to pump blood under extreme strain due to this ailment, which is characterized by the aortic valve narrowing. In addition to making treating his other conditions more difficult, the constant pressure raised his risk of heart failure, exhaustion, and unexpected cardiac events. Cerebral vascular disease was layered on top of this cardiovascular strain, a progressive condition that affects the brain's fragile blood vessels. The risk of further strokes, cognitive impairment, and neurological degeneration was significantly increased by this condition. Frank's brain, which was already vulnerable, was in danger every day. His ongoing struggle with Crohn's disease, an inflammatory condition that causes inflammation and damage to the digestive tract, made things much more difficult. Crohn's disease increased his physical suffering by making it harder for his body to fight infection and absorb nutrition, which made his agony and exhaustion worse. A group of experts from the fields of cardiology, neurology, gastroenterology, and rehabilitation met at the beginning of 2024 to create a thorough interdisciplinary treatment plan. Curing was not their goal. It was now a delicate balance between extending life and optimizing comfort rather than a realistic aim. The goal of rehabilitation treatments was to restore as much bodily function as possible. His diet was carefully planned to support his body without exacerbating his intestinal issues, and his heart rhythms were closely watched to prevent unexpected emergencies. The medical staff had a glimmer of cautious hope amidst this intricate web of care. Even in decline, the human body's tenacity can occasionally take one by surprise. However, this optimism was brittle, overshadowed by the disease's unstoppable development and growing consequences. Unbeknownst to the general public and many of Frank's supporters, time was passing. In addition to these medical endeavors, equally significant judgments were being made in private. The quality and course of his last months were determined by guardianship agreements, financial supervision, and treatment authorizations. Decisions made in private legal offices and conference rooms set the direction for Frank's final days. But there was no comfort in preparedness. The end was imminent. Control by conservators. According to reports, the state of Iowa ruled Frank Fritz medically disabled after his crippling stroke in July 2022, so preventing him from handling his own financial and personal affairs. As a direct result, the court allegedly designated a close friend as his conservator, a position that, in theory, was meant to protect Frank's best interests by giving this person complete legal control over his money, assets, and healthcare choices. Insiders and legal watchers, however, said the reality seemed much more complicated and concerning. According to reports, this conservatorship concentrated tremendous authority in the hands of one individual, who thereafter led a growing group of financial managers. They allegedly acquired the sole authority to accept or reject almost every aspect of Frank's care and estate administration. The sale of Frank's personal belongings to pay for his escalating medical expenses was one of the conservator's most important duties. According to court filings and estate records, they oversaw the sale of many of his most valuable belongings, including his priceless collection of vintage motorcycles, unique vintage signs, and even furniture from his Iowa home. Many people close to Frank were shocked by the quick depletion, since it is said that more than 70% of his known belongings were liquidated in the first year of the conservatorship. As early as 2023, financial advisors hired by the conservatorship estate allegedly warned that the rising costs of long-term care were unsustainable. According to internal memos from that time period that were acquired by people with knowledge of the matter, there was intense anxiety that the estate's finances might run out completely if nothing was done. A move towards strategic efficiencies, a term that would soon be used as a euphemism for drastic cost-cutting measures, was the suggested remedy. Decision-making supposedly started to shift from solely medical considerations to financial containment at this turning point, which was the introduction of strategic efficiency. According to critics, the conservatorship's priorities changed from protecting Frank's health and quality of life to focusing on financial restraints and cutting costs. According to reports, the most important choices influencing Frank's course of treatment and care were made by the financial supervision team rather than his medical specialists. These included the contentious cessation of essential treatments, the postponement of medical operations, and, in the end, the switch to hospice care. Rumors among friends, advocates, and some legal experts point to a much more concerning dynamic, despite official pronouncements framing these changes as essential modifications to balance service quality with fiscal discipline. There have been claims that financial considerations may have taken precedence over medical advice, which raises serious ethical concerns regarding the impact of conservatorship arrangements on the welfare of vulnerable people. Uncertainty surrounds the precise reasons underlying these choices. Were Frank's interests truly protected by the conservatorship's leadership in the face of severe economic realities? Or did it unintentionally, or in some other way, turn into a means of achieving financial gain at the expense of his well-being? This ongoing conflict between many people question who actually held the reins of power throughout Frank Fritz's demise because of the long-lasting shadow produced by his fiduciary duty and compassionate care. Unexpected cancellations cause suspicion. Frank Fritz's illness was deemed serious but stable by medical professionals by August 2024. A systematic strategy had been in place for several months, according to people familiar with his care team. Its goals were to retain functionality, minimize suffering, and, to the greatest extent feasible, preserve quality of life, rather than achieving a full recovery. According to reports, the plan called for daily mobility exercises, regular speech therapy, and a planned sequence of cardiovascular surgeries aimed at treating his cerebral vascular disease and aortic stenosis. There had been indications of cautious success with the setup. According to a previous nurse, Frank was still attentive to his environment, and during therapy sessions, he showed modest but encouraging reactions. He was partially paralyzed and physically constrained, but his medical problems were apparently less frequent. And for a while, people who knew him best thought the slide had stopped. After then, everything shifted suddenly and without warning. Sessions of speech therapy were canceled. According to reports, his mobility assistant ceased showing up. According to insiders, the heart surgeries were discreetly delayed after having been approved and scheduled only weeks previously, then taken out of his therapy regimen completely. Overnight, what had been an aggressive, if constrained, rehabilitation plan turned into palliative care. No medical emergency was mentioned, and no statement was made. In actuality, it is said that the physicians made no recommendations on stopping treatment. According to people acquainted with internal estate talks, the financial administrator in charge of Frank's conservatorship made the decision directly. This person had ultimate control over the costs associated with his care. Internal memos purportedly provided the rationale that Frank's treatments were no longer financially viable. Frank's once impressive assets had been gradually depleted during his conservatorship in order to pay for the growing expenses of 247 care. Numerous motorcycles, collectibles, and antiques were sold, many of them for significantly less than their estimated value. According to reports, his Iowa farm was put under lien. Therefore, the estate's financial officers allegedly stepped in when care expenditures increased once more that August, particularly for treatments with dubious results. Two people who examined those conversations claimed that the decision to halt active care was presented as a financial need rather than a medical necessity. Frank's condition quickly deteriorated. In the absence of mobility assistance, he became bedridden. Any communication development he had achieved vanished in the absence of speech therapy. Additionally, his pre-existing problems deteriorated in the absence of heart monitoring. He was discreetly moved to hospice care, where his main goal was to be comfortable until the very end. The timing would have appeared to the outside world to be a dire development in a protracted illness. However, the suddenness of the changes caused significant skepticism among those who knew him. Why now? Why were all supportive measures removed after months of investment in minor advancements? Nobody knew the complete solution. Not yet, anyhow. However, a sneak peek would be available on September 30th, 2024. Sadly, it wasn't until Frank Fritz's death that the complete truth was revealed. The part that made all the difference. Frank Fritz's estate went into probate after he passed away on September 30th, 2024. due to complications from a stroke. This procedure, which most people would consider regular, revealed something that allegedly astounded all parties. His initial production deal with the network that produced American Pickers had a secret provision. The clause purportedly said that all future residual income rights, including royalties, merchandise earnings, and syndication profits, would automatically return to the production company if Frank remained medically incapacitated for 24 consecutive months. According to people familiar with the situation, to put it plainly, Frank's estate would keep getting payments if he lived past October 11, 2024. Those profits would be lost if he passed away or was still unable to work before that date. Frank suffered a stroke in mid-July 2022, which meant that the 24-month period would end on October 11, 2024, just 11 days after his death. A legal assessment of that phrase occurred only weeks before Frank's care plan was canceled, based on conjectural readings of estate documents. There seems to be a pattern of growing worry from the conservatorship's financial advisors, according to Internal Communications, ODA. According to one individual who examined it, one paper included a reversion threshold and forewarned of unsecured risk exposure in the event that Frank's condition persisted after the clause date. Sued. The decision to stop mobility aids, stop therapy, and stop cardiovascular operations no longer seemed random or solely medical in this context. These acts may have been financially strategic, according to insiders. To be clear, no official proof of intent to speed up Frank's demise has surfaced. However, the suddenness of care withdrawal and the timing, so near to the clause's expiration, have stoked a lot of conjecture. Over the ensuing decades, Frank's estate might have gotten millions in residuals if he had lived an additional 12 days. Instead, the money lawfully returned to the corporation because of the precise timing of his death. Was it a coincidence? That's the question that's currently circulating in both legal and public circles. The incidents have been reported in private by those close to Frank as being too exact to ignore. Legal experts have described the date as an almost surgical alignment with contract reversal, although they are reluctant to accuse anyone of misconduct. Once a footnote in a contract that lasted a lifetime, the clause is now at the heart of what some are referring to as the quietest tragedy in reality television. Finally, the riddle has been unraveled. American Pickers fans pondered for years what had truly happened to Frank Fritz. Oh, Frank Fritz. What had caused him to abruptly leave the show? Why was his years of service not acknowledged? Nor was there a public farewell or tribute. Why has one of the most identifiable faces in the history of cable TV disappeared from the public eye so thoroughly, spirally? The solution is finally starting to come to light, and it's more terrifying than anyone could have predicted. Months of private medical records, contract audits, and estate evaluations revealed that Frank's silent fall was more than just a case of bad health. It resulted from a system that prioritized economic efficiency over human dignity, a structure that made access to healthcare contingent on financial constraints, and a legal deadline for survival. The conservatorship that was supposed to safeguard him reportedly changed its emphasis from extending life to minimizing responsibility to medical need to financial preservation. The physicians didn't give up and Frank wasn't denied treatment. According to reports, his carers wished to go on. Financial officers made the withdrawal. Several insiders claimed that they had read the 24-month contract agreement and knew what was involved. A countdown began after he suffered a stroke in July 2022. 11 days before his death in September 2024, his estate was unable to gather what may have been a lifeline. The network that had previously benefited from his image lawfully returned the money, which disappeared. Was it planned? No court has stated as much. There are no official charges. However, the question that still plagues both colleagues and fans is whether Frank Fritz was killed. The figures were in agreement. The care was taken away, and there was a deafening silence before and after his passing. Once founded on the thrill of discovery and the delight of forgotten things, Frank's legacy was diminished to a line item on a balance sheet in Zelda. His previously charming and inquisitive voice waned not only due to illness, but also because the people in charge apparently calculated the costs. Now that the last pieces of the puzzle have been put in position, the enigma has been finally unraveled. What's left, however, is far more disturbing. It is possible that one of the most adored TV celebrities passed away due to a contract rather than illness. In a society where dying can be more profitable than surviving, what does that say? Leave a comment with your ideas. So, we appreciate you viewing this video with us, and we hope to see you in the next one.